A Joe has her sights set on Cobra. Here's your look at the new Hasbro. This is the G.I. Joe Classified Series, Scarlett. G.I. Joe is a highly skilled, on-demand special operations force of men and women from around the globe. These extraordinary talented heroes are selected for their elite abilities and tasked with defending the world from Cobra, a ruthless criminal organization bent on total domination. Before we get a closer look at Scarlett, the first thing we're going to do is figure out how tall this figure stands. On average, the new classified series of Joes sits at around a 6-inch range. Now, that doesn't mean that all the figures are going to be obviously 6 inches in height, because they have increased and decreased the height. They've kind of improved the heights of these Joes, making them a little more accurate, so you won't have like a Roadblock the exact same height as Scarlett. In the case here of Scarlett, she's standing 5.8 inches, but again, that's the shorter range of that 6-inch line. Duke, for example, will be a little bit taller. Roadblock will be even taller still. And switching that over to centimeters, you're looking at the figure standing 14.8, so almost 15 centimeters in height. To show you what I mean by that, we're going to move over Scarlett for a second, and we're going to bring in Duke, the other figure that we already had a look at. Duke is, yes, taller by Scarlett, only by just a little bit, just by a hair, if you will. Again, like this line, I felt so biased when we looked at Duke, feeling heavily rooted in my childhood. I really wanted this line to be more a modern take of the Sunbow design of cartoon characters, and that's essentially what these are. I mean, it's still taking the same designs. Like, this looks like Duke, this looks like Scarlett. It simply just modernized it for what these characters could potentially look like nowadays. Could they have looked a little bit more like their cartoon counterparts, literally like pulling them from the screen? Yeah, that would have been fine and good. But that's not the direction that Hasbro went with this line. Instead, again, modernizing them a little bit. And again, I'm kind of feeling like I'm warming up to this line. Having already looked at Duke and having already liked Duke, I'm liking also what I'm seeing here from Scarlett as well. Looking at Scarlett's accessories, we'll first have a look at a crossbow. The crossbow comes in 2 pieces, and a lot of times what you will be seeing is 2 pieces, as this seems to pop off frequently. It's essentially just a rectangular peg, a peg hole, and then you're just lining it up to the peg that's located on the top. I'm not sure the reasoning why they made this as 2 separate pieces, unless the idea is that you can remove the top, and this can just be a makeshift gun, possibly firearm. But needless to say, though, it does attach together. I feel it would have made just more sense to mold the entire thing all in one casting, but they decided to do 2. This more modernized take is more of a tactical-looking design crossbow. It does look like it's just been cast in black plastic with no real additional paint that's been added to it. You can take it and you can fit it into her hand. She has 2 choices, as she does have, of course, 2 hands. One hand is more so kind of suited for holding the knives, as it definitely just has more of a grip look to it. The other hand, on the other hand, does have a trigger finger. So it kind of gives you an idea of which hand you really should be displaying it in, but it's not to say that you can't put the crossbow in the other hand. It's entirely up to you. You can fit it into the point where the finger looks like it's actually fitting over the trigger. That's a nice touch. And again, like I said, you can put that into her hand. Still not really sure why the crossbow has to be 2 separate pieces, but certainly not going to be a deal breaker for me. The other accessory she comes included with is a series of knives, and it certainly lends then to a talking point I wanted to mention about this particular figure. We'll put her down just for a second, and we'll grab those knives right now. She has 2 variations of the knife. She comes with a regular blade, a smooth blade, and then she comes with one that's got serrated teeth on the side. Now, this one knife is actually copied twice, as certainly you get 2 of them. These can be either fit into her hand. Again, you can display her with this specific hand holding the knife, or again, if you wanted to, you could put knives in both of her hands. These knives are pretty difficult to fit into her hand, primarily because the grip is so small. It involved me having to pry the fingers open more so, just so I can get the handle actually fit in between her fingers and her thumb. And again, like I said, it does give you certainly a more tighter grip, that's to be said, when you eventually get this into her hand. But as I said, it's just a little bit more difficult to get it into her hand. There we go. Just sort of once you get past that, once it's in her hand, it's definitely not going to be going anywhere. And like I said, she does come with the 2 serrated knife edges, and then she has one smaller knife. Now, these can be housed on the figure, thank goodness for that. There is a sheath located on the front of the figure's torso. You're going to then take the one that's the smaller blade without the teeth, and that fits just into the top like so. The other ones, if you flip it around to the back and you look at her sheath, you move her hair out of the way, there's actually indicators here on the sides where the arrows are housed. These are shaped exactly like the shapes of the blades. Well, kind of give you an idea then of which way you're going to be putting it. So you slide it in, and it basically just opens up. They left basically this whole area open. I mean, really, you only need the spots on either side. And like I said, those just slide in place. Bit of a tight quarters, but they do stay in place. And you can have the knives that way. Now, it does beg certainly one question, a question I thought to myself when I first grabbed this figure and opened it up by the packaging. Why would you have the arrows facing the other way? My logic of thinking would be that she would want to draw the arrows from over her shoulder, not necessarily from below. An argument could also be made that if she is in battle, it's probably a lot easier to pull the arrows from the bottom than from the top. So there's 2 schools, certainly the way that you want to look at it. Say if you want to flip, however, say you want to take this and flip this around. To do that, you're just going to take the head, pop it off the ball joint like that. It's a very large ball joint. You can take this whole entire quiver with the strap, the bandolier, and fit that over her arms like that. Well, if you want to flip it the right way, if you turn it this way and put it back on the way that you found it, one problem does come across, one problem will be the case. If you look at the sculpting of the bandolier, it clearly isn't sculpted the way now to fit the torso properly. It sort of flops and moves about. It's not really intended to be that way. One way you can kind of work around this is pop this off and you can feed the bandolier the opposite way. And you'll see what I mean when I do this. If you fit this then over the ball joint, now the bandolier fits snug and it fits to contour the grooves and the shape of her torso. Then you can go ahead and put the torso, put the head back onto the torso. Making sure again we got it the right way here. Let's pop the head on, put it on this way because we want to be able to bend the neck and fit it over this way. And this does now cause the figure to look a little bit more like the older Scarlett, the idea that you'd be pulling the arrows from the top. It also then would make sense that if she's pulling the blades, for example, let's bend the arm, it would make sense that she could then pull the blades from the bottom of her sheath, of Quiver, and then she'd be able to throw them. So there's obviously that option. One downside to doing it this way is obviously when she's moving her head back and forth, she's got this big honking handle, of course, that's sticking in her face. If you don't mind that, you can bring it down a little bit, granted. But if you don't mind it, I actually might like the idea more so of displaying her with the quiver with the arrows facing up. But as I said, you can do it either way. It's entirely up to you. And hopefully that's helped you. So those are her accessories. I think for the sake of just blocking her face, I'm going to just pull the blade out and I'm going to put it to the side. The other ones I could probably just keep there. They're not doing any harm. They're not hurting anybody. So let's have a look at Scarlett. Scarlett, really, of all the figures, was the one I was most on the fence about. There was something about the changes that they made to this particular figure that I wasn't sure I really actually was going to like. Now physically getting it in hand, I feel, again, like the Duke, I'm warming up to this line more so. Scarlett does come across awfully young, doesn't she? I feel if reading her face, not that I would be able to gauge the age of somebody based on their face, I would almost pinpoint her at being closer to maybe 17 to 20. Certainly not in her 20s. She has a very young looking face. She actually looks like somebody I used to go out with back in the day. Just, I don't know why I felt the need to say that, but she does kind of bear a bit of a resemblance to somebody I used to know. But the face is actually rather pretty. They've got the freckles there on the cheek running across the bridge of the nose. The eyes are very pretty, also done in a crystal blue. Now, the hair is certainly something to talk about. Oh, and also she has the earrings on the sides. I mean, she's a pretty looking head sculpt. Kind of in a way, I like the fact that they put the freckles on there, but maybe that adds a little bit to the reasoning why she comes across so young. The hair is done more of an orange color than your traditional scarlet red. Would have liked if this was a darker color, Be fair though, it does match. If they were to do a darker red, it probably would be too close to the front of the holstered knife, or it'd be probably too close to this makeshift turtle shell that she sort of has on the side of her arm. And maybe that's one of the reasonings why they went more the lighter orange instead of the darker red that I'm more used to seeing. Her hair is in a ponytail. It's a nice, decent sculpting to the hair. I like how these individual hairs are sort of sticking out. They seem like they would be shorter, but again, I like the fact that they stick out as opposed to just all of them coming down to one solid kind of horsetail mold. For the coloring on the figure's body, it's still your traditional Scarlett's colors. You've got like this blue color, which is the majority of her outfit in the comic, the original comics and the original figure from the old vintage line. The torso area, or this section basically right here, would be like a mustard yellow. And then her arms and her legs would be closer to like this blue color. So it's nice to see that Hasbro has continued the trend of keeping those same colors in check when it comes to Scarlett. She's even got like the little arrows located on her arm, which I think like the old vintage figure actually had as well. So those are all nice touches. And then they also add all this additional color. Now, you probably already know my feelings when it comes to these additional colors. I don't feel they're necessarily. There's a lot of additional, why would they choose these specific colors? Like, I like the mustard yellow, but then they felt the need to add the additional gold. Truth be told, I mean, again, if you look at Duke's had sort of the same thing happening. Gray with the additional need to add gold, and then the additional need to add these blue panel lines. Scarlett seems to have the same thing. And I don't know if these are specifically communicators, because of course we don't have a tie-in cartoon or comic to this run so far, but I noticed that Duke's got a very similar sort of blue here on his bandolier. I don't know, if these are communication devices or if they serve some other purpose. Maybe they're holographic emitters for all I know. But I did notice that Duke's got it here, Scarlett's got it here on her shoulder. Nice touch to the old vintage line as well is that she has this band of red that has the same styling of pattern that also, like I said, the older figure had. She does have this tortoise shell, which is only the best way I could describe it. It is attached in a way that it doesn't have its own posability. Pushing it on it all you want is not going to move it, no matter how hard you want to. I wish this was actually on a separate hinge joint, or if they had hinged it on the shoulder. I get the idea why they put it the way that they did, so that if she moved her arm out, this would then rest against the top of her shoulder. But if you have it straight down, it does stick out. I would have loved to have been able to curve that and bend it on an angle so it conformed to the side of her shoulder. You can't unfortunately do that. Again, some nice detailing done with the gold, whether I feel it's unnecessary to add all the additional colors. The gold, it certainly could be said at least is a nice touch. Mixing that then with the coloring of the mustard yellow does translate to a decent looking color scheme. But then you get all this additional red that they've added to the side. I feel, if anything, they probably should have just kept this all gray instead of feeling the need to add the additional crimson red, but that's what they decided to do. They didn't paint, unfortunately, the pegs that connect the knees, the lower leg to the top of the thigh. They've kept it the same blue plastic that is in the tops of the shoulders and the area of the mid-torso. One interesting thing about this particular figure is this section right here. You can actually see that there is this layer of softer plastic on the pant area that is actually over top of a main body. Like just I would imagine maybe, if anything, they're probably going to use the same body for female figures. So maybe when, for example, we get a Zorana or we get ourselves a Baroness, maybe we will be getting that same lower body. As you can see, this is just a separate piece. The legs on mine, I don't know why, are a bit on the loose side. The joint I know with Duke was able to hinge up, and I can still do that with Scarlett, but they do feel like they sit a little too loose for my liking. You got sort of that dinner bell thing happening. Again, you've got the additional mustard yellow with the combination of golds and the blue and the red. Yes, there's a lot of colors together. I mean, it's not necessarily to the point where it's too busy that it takes away from the figure. It's just based on the initial design of Scarlett that I like. I just feel like it's extra color that isn't necessary. On the back, she's got what seems to be thrusters. They seem to be thrusters at least, or vents or something. Maybe this is jet propulsion. Maybe this allows the Scarlett to fly in the air without the need of a jetpack. I don't know. But she does have these rather strange looking propulsions on the backs of her legs. Not really sure why they're there. There's the feet, of course, some additional red that's happening on the undersole there. One thing also I really like about the Scarlett, though I again feel the unnecessary need of color shouldn't have been added, I do like the texturing that they did to the legs. I mean, the legs themselves have a nice pattern work done to the materials on the legs, the back of the, of course, torso. And the belt is a separate piece. One last thing I certainly wanted to mention. The belt is a separate piece, certainly as the bandolier is a separate piece. I suppose you could probably try to take this off. That would likely involve you having to pop the entire top half off to then remove this. That seems like a lot of work. It doesn't flop around too much. It doesn't have as much the issue that I had with, say, Duke's bandolier. And if anything, you can just bring that down a little bit lower, and it seems to make it a little tighter against her lower half. For the figure's articulation, let's have a look at that right now. Her head rotates back and forth. If you decide to switch the sheath, the quiver, I keep jumping back and forth. If you switch the quiver this way, as opposed to having it down how it was originally intended, it does limit a little bit of the posability. In other words, when you move the head back and forth, she does butt it up against the arrows. If that doesn't bother you too much, then that shouldn't bother you too much. You can, like I said, move the head all the way around. Because she does have that new additional articulation, she basically has it at the base of the neck, and she has it at the top of the head as well. The hardest part, again, just with these figures, is getting that joint working out. As you can see, the hinge joint is right there, but I've got the neck turned the wrong way. Let's see if I can shift it back around. There we go. There we go. So she does have the hinge up and down on her head. You can rock it back and forth, and again, you can rotate it all the way around. Again, when you are rotating the head, sometimes it means that you're also shifting this, so you may want to just make sure it's back in the right place before you start moving the head again. Upper torso is also have that little socket joint at the base of the neck where you can move the head up and down that way as well, and you can rock the neck back and forth this way too. The arms hinge out at not quite a full 90-degree bend. It's just a little short, just not too much, but just a little too short. Again, the way that they've put this little shoulder guard in place, it does sort of conform again to the side of the torso, but it does, it just stands out a little bit more when you have the arms straight down. She does have a swivel at the bicep. Unlike Duke, though, she only has a single hinge in the elbow, which seems to be the case with a lot of female figures. They don't tend to give you double hinges in the elbows, usually just a single. The arm rotates all the way around. You can also rotate the hand all the way around. She has an upper torso ball joint, and in addition to that, she has a lower torso ball joint too. The legs split out. I'm finding difficulty with the legs, moving them out. It feels like I'm fighting against something, and in other times I feel like the legs get then too loose. I know this part here, this lower half of the leg drops down. You can pop that back up, but when you do pop it up, it broadens the legs so that the thighs match up to the lower half of her torso. But they're a bit stubborn, it seems, when you're moving the legs forward and back. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a little bit of clicking that I seem to have on mine. I don't know if that's the case with all the Scarletts, but I did notice it on this one. She has a swivel on the 3/4 cut of the thigh. You can rotate that all the way around. She has a double hinge on the knee. Articulation on the top of her boot. She has articulation also in her feet. You can rock those back and forth. And like with Duke, she does also have peg holes on the undersides of her feet. This is a line, again, that seems with every figure that I'm looking at, I seem to like just a little bit more. Scarlett, though, creative decisions were certainly made behind the scenes as to the way that she's looking like right now. She still has the aspects, the elements of what I liked so much with Scarlett's initial costume. Still keeping that mustard yellow, still incorporating that kind of bluish color, that dark purple blue that she's got in her sleeves and her mid-torso. She still feels and reads like Scarlett. As I said, just more modernized than anything else. The face is a bit on the young side, and her hair is a bit on the orange side, but all in all, it's still a nice looking Scarlett. One thing I am liking about the new G.I. Joe Classified series is despite its modernized take on these characters that I grew up with, Hasbro was still firmly rooted in the vintage line when they came up with the designs for their costumes. Say Scarlett, for example. Familiar are the colors of the blue and the mustard yellow, as her vintage toy line had that as well. They felt still the need to bring that over to the more modern take on Scarlett, and I think it works really, really well. Her face is on the young side, but it's something, it's not definitely a deal breaker to this figure. It's just not what I picture Scarlett to be, nor do I imagine Scarlett ever having orange hair, but somehow it seems to work still on this figure. The figure does have that quiver that's flipped around in packaging. If that is the intended plan, I guess the idea is that she pulls the arrows from the bottom of her torso when she's ready to reload her crossbow. As you can see in this video, and hopefully you saw in this video, you can flip that around if you wanted to. But to get that best look, it's best to alternate it and flip it to the other side of her torso, so at least the bandolier conforms to her torso itself. Yes, indeed, it's not a bad looking Scarlett when it's all said and done. Is the face too young for a deal breaker on this figure? Not at all. In fact, again, I'm just warming up to this line. I like more and more the Duke now that I've had him on packaging, out of packaging and on display. I feel the exact same thing with Scarlett. Initially not too sure how I was going to be feeling about this Scarlett with her new modernized take, but now I've got her out of the packaging and I've got her posed with a crossbow, I'm kind of digging the design of her overall. What do you guys think of Scarlett? Let me know down below in the comments section, or overall, what do you guys think of the G.I. Joe Classified series so far? Also, if you guys are new to this channel and liking the content you're seeing, consider the idea of hitting that subscribe button down below. As well, move on over to the bell notification. You may want to turn that on as well, so that when future videos are coming onto this channel, you won't be that person that's missing out. We're going to have a look, of course, at Roadblock and future reviews. We may also be going down the road of Classified series, as we certainly will be having a look. I certainly will be hoping to have a look at some more G.I. Joe Classified series figures. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.